Thank you very much for watching. Let us get into a conversation, as always, on a Thursday night with our dear friend, Drew Hildebrand, who is here in the Man Cave, or the study, or HQ, whatever we like to call it.
Wonderful to be here. I like Man Cave. It makes me feel tougher than I ever have in my entire life. It's almost like I can finally take off the glasses and care about football.
I'll walk you through it.
Thank you.
All right, Ross Goodell. Ross Goodell joins us now. Of course, National Senator, Shadow Minister as well. He's in Canberra. Now, I do not want to talk about Grace Tame, okay? I'm not going to talk about Grace Tame. Why? I sort of think of that Simpsons just don't look principle, right? Because there's no winning in all of this stuff. But the event of him at the event where he's asked to come up with one word, he comes up with the one word, the sky falls in because this is interpreted to be a certain way, brings us to a point where some lefties and some lefty news organisations are starting to notice what we've known since he became leader in 2019. He never admits he's wrong, ever. Remember when he fell off the stage? Didn't happen. Now he's trying to pretend that, what I really meant to say was... Anyway, interesting here, which was the PM's biggest problem isn't calling difficult. It's that he can't admit that he's wrong. This is what's interesting here, right? Again, can we just read into part of this here, which is the entire country misunderstands something that you say, are the people at fault for not knowing your intentions, or are you at fault for being clumsy with your words? And if your subsequent apology is ham-fisted and comes across as unaware and insincere, who cops the blame then? Now, Joe, here's your mate. He's incredibly successful, but I'll say this. Yep. I've seen plenty of politicians who have had the benefit of the doubt, and people just look the other way, they look the other way. Whenever, at whatever point, they start to look and see this stuff, it pisses them off very quickly, and, what is it? Rooster to feather duster is pretty fast. That ain't happening next week. What is it about him that even when he's flying as high as he is, and he's seemingly as strong as and impenetrable as he is politically, right, that he still can't turn around and say, I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing?
Do you know, I was actually just I was in Canberra this week, and I was talking to a mate of mine who's an advisor as well, sort of guru type of comms guy on the Labor side of things. We're at the Kingo Hotel, and I promised I'd say hello to Flamo, superstar.
G'day, Flamo.
It is. I think partly it's a difference between the right and the left to some extent. So you look, there's two different styles of leadership. One is the Peter Beattie style, which is you apologise straight away and you pledge to fix the problem. Similar to this is the Bob Carr school, which you and I witnessed firsthand, where something will go horribly wrong in a hospital or at a Department of Community Services or whatever it is, and everyone will be furious and outraged, and you outrage them, and so you say, you think you're angry, I'm furious, I'm going to sack the DG, I'm going to look into this, and we go blah, blah, blah. And the Chris Minns thing as well. Chris Minns is very much of the school where he says, you know what, we stuffed up.
And I'm more fine with that, but this is the bloke who's in charge, and he's more of the Daniel Andrews script.
That's right. And then on the left side of...
I might be, but I'm on
the left side of politics, it kind of, because it's more ideologically driven, not that Albo's particularly ideological anymore, but the whole idea is that, this works, the system works. And so they sort of can't admit that they're wrong or say sorry, because the whole premise is that this, the system that they are adhering to is successful. And Daniel Andrews was notoriously stubborn and would just sort of say, and I've known another ex-PM, not Albo, who literally just looked me in the eye, private conversation, and said, black was white, literally, right? So that never happened. And I looked at him and I kind of was speechless for a while. And I thought to myself, this is George Costanza territory. It's not a lie because you actually believe it. And I think part of it is also politicians having to tell themselves that something didn't happen, because otherwise it's just too...
And thank you, because that's what I wanted to know about what some of the internals are. Because the thing is, the external to all of this is, I love when it's a prime minister they don't like, right? And by they I mean all the people that are screaming on the internet, or the think pieces, or all of the news coverage that gets tilted. Oh, it's about personal and personally tone deaf. Remember just how personal things can be if it's a Liberal prime minister. Nothing's personal when it comes to this bloke. Again, I think it is a chink in the armour, not perhaps a fatal flaw, but a chink in the armour that he would be best to have a look at. But again, he's got very rich by ignoring my advice in all of this. Ross, I don't want to get you engaged on that. Instead, I want to talk here about power bills and the politics of power bills. 1 in 6 households, we learned today, after a survey of 3,000 people, well, guess what? They're struggling to pay their power bills. A survey of 3,000 people found 72% of households have already seen their costs climb since the subsidies ended, you know, the ones that were about lying about inflation and getting re-elected. Worked for them, but them is, of course, not you, so who cares? With nearly 20% of those people now unable to meet the higher costs without significant strain. OK, you and I would both think that this would have a political consequence, but I read almost every poll and I read the crosstabs and I read the bit behind that and I read the bit behind the bit behind that. No such penalty, though. The politics of power bills. We assume it to be one thing, but is the reality a little more shocking to us that despite the fact that there are people that are struggling, a significant number don't, and they just don't care.
This is exactly the point. It's become so hard for so long that people are getting used to it and they're not getting as angry they are about the things they should get angry. You're talking about 1 in 6 people having trouble paying their power bills. Yes, just yesterday, they've got a market cap, which is the most anyone can charge for their wholesale rate. That went up by more than 10% on that market cap. We saw in estimates in the New South Wales Parliament, Penny Sharp this week, talking about, wholesale price is 50%, but then pushed by Wes Fang, sits there and goes, oh, yes, but then the prices are going up because there's a whole lot of other infrastructure that has to go into the grids now and the power lines and all the associated stuff. This is a sham, but again, you go back to what you were saying before. If you believe it, it's not a lie. We've got Bowen out there, the cheapest, cleanest energy there ever is. They can't back away from that. They can't say we've made mistakes or we're spending too much. All the evidence is in. People are struggling. We've got real wages going down again for the first time, since we got over the COVID spend. All this is hurting and people are suffering, but we'll just kick down the torpedoes, keep going ahead, forget what's going on. It's time for truth to come through. We've got to stop being as careful. We are paying too much for stuff. People are fibbing about the consequences. People are suffering at home and they're putting up with it. They've got to get angrier.
Joe, I remember years ago when we were talking and there was a whole bunch of polling about how much you're willing to pay, this band, to save the planet when it comes to climate. And there is a price point where people go, no, and it could be $250, right?
Yep.
We are way past what supposedly were the red lines. Why doesn't it matter? Why doesn't it seem to change anything? Because to me, again, if the logic going in and politics to this moment has been you make things more expensive, people get the shits, and when they do, they change their votes. Why haven't they changed their votes?
I think part of it is the frog in the water, so you don't sort of realise what's happening until it's too late. And I think another part of it is just the complete collapse of any alternative. I mean, the coalition has been so woeful over the past, 9 months, with the one exception of Ross. But everyone else has been. That's right. But I mean, it's no secret that the coalition just sort of hasn't been focused on holding the government to account and instead been navel gazing and tearing itself apart.
But in fairness, yes, post 25 election, right?
Yeah.
But they're talking about power prices in some form or another.
Yeah, but they didn't
all the way from 19 to now.
But again, the nuclear reactor stuff, and I'm nuclear agnostic. I'm not sort of anti. But people just didn't think it was credible, and then they were spooked by how the electorate would result, so they shut up about it in the election campaign. So if you want to make the government look irresponsible, you've got to be a tight outfit that doesn't look.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, if you're trying to go after somebody, then you've got to make sure that there's no hole in the Death Star for somebody to be able to come. Or in the case of the last election, just pretending the Death Star was a potato. Just make it up. Yeah. Just anywhere else. Look over here. Yeah. Look what's under threat. Rubbish. So the ISIS bride stuff. Well done to Shari in particular, who in the last hour was quite correctly talking about how the sausage is being made, about how suddenly we're hearing from the kids in all of this. Now, again, I don't want to hear from the kids in all of this because I want to hear from the parents, right? I want to hear from the mothers about what they believe, right? Because if there's an opportunity to make sure that somebody who still has some sort of, openness to the reason they left the country in the first place, then guess what? The door goes hard here. Ross, the PR campaign is very effective. It reminds me a little bit of all of those people who definitely had to leave Nauru and Manus Island because of their life-threatening conditions, all of which went into hospital and not one of which stayed longer than a couple of weeks, that it feels like, oh, I don't know, look, I know Mum left the country to be with the bloke who wanted to behead people, but the little girl, who may well have either been born in the camp or born overseas, or the little girl who was a baby when she left, I don't know, she's got to come back.
It's a great pivot. You went out there and the argument was about these brides had to come back, they're Australians, got to look after them. That started to lose momentum and it started to, have pushback. So we've got to pivot and show, these poor kids, and they've made, how can they suffer because of this? The answer is, these people are wanting to come back because they lost. They backed a horse and they lost. If their beaux, their husbands, their partners had won, would these women be part of a group that was, putting other women down, keeping other children unsafe? They want to come back here because they lost and it offers, the best chance of the way forward. They chose to go there. They chose to have children with these people. They can't choose not to have the consequences of that. I'm sorry, if there is any security risk, Australians here deserve to be protected. And we can't allow lots of people with a colouring book and reading stories about Australia to sway us from the fact it is not in our interest if these people pose a security risk to come here. And they were very clever. Even Labor went their words on this. We're not providing assistance. Well, I'll be buggered if they haven't done something behind the scenes or organised with someone else to make stuff happen. This is private conversation Tony Burke had without any people presence. Something is going on here. Once again, they don't want us to know, and they're just pivoting to the next argument and be successful.
Again, a little detail, but still worth noting here, right? If a journalist can make their way to the camp in Syria, can't somebody from the Australian government make their way to the camp in Syria?
Yes, but I don't think the government... I think the government is trying to thread this needle, and similar to what Ross said, but I think they're trying to... They won't provide any assistance, so they can say they're not providing any assistance.
Apart from...
However, they do not have...
Giving them to a bloke to...
That's right, but they do, and they can just say, well, we have no choice but to do that because of the High Court decision. We cannot revoke their citizenship, and if they're citizens, then we cannot refuse them passports.
But it should all be sitting in the embassy in Lebanon, so if you can get to the embassy in Lebanon, good luck.
Yeah, well, again, they seem to have had people operating as proxies for the families who have been able to organise that, and my friend Jamal Rifi seems to be one of them. And to be honest, that surprised me, but I have such faith in his judgment and decency that led me to have perhaps more sympathy for the cause than I otherwise would have.
Again, we understand the angle by which he comes, but again, it's just this process, right? Again, about the ability for, I'll pick up the passports on somebody else's behalf, rather than saying, okay, we can send this stuff. There's diplomatic mail, very specific diplomatic mail. That means you can send it to this embassy in this country, and if they want to get there, then the conversation begins. But of course, details, ambitious budget. Look over here. He cuts, you'll pay. We're saving money in the budget. Sorry, which is all of this? Winner or loser of the week? Ross Cadell, who stands out for you?
Mate, I was going to be loser for Mel Nokas for his bum wiping stuff, but he's got the MotoGP in Adelaide, so I can't make him get. I'm going to go out there. Christy McBain today announced her national messaging service only 1,000% above budget, 2 years late, and couldn't get the app to play the noise for 20 seconds and said it doesn't work.
By the way, in Adelaide this weekend, Festival of Motorsport, which is sort of their version of what happens in the UK, lots of classy, good old-fashioned cars.
And no Randa Abdel Fattah either. She's not invited to that festival.
So enjoy that, Joe. Your winner or loser, mate?
Look, I'm going to go, for winner, I'm going to go Julian Hill, the left-wing MP who realised that actually Labor, looking like it hates Australia Day and opposes the flag, is probably not the best sell for mainstream voters. Welcome aboard, Julian. I've only been saying the exact same thing for a decade now, but it's great to have you, my friend. And loser, I'm going to go Pauline. I think the Muslim vote stuff obviously backfired. Even her own senators and Barnaby ran a mile from it, and now she's just dropped a handful of points in the latest poll, and Angus and the coalition have picked up again. So I think she might have hit her coming out on the other end.
I'll have a side bet with you about whether it's another 4 points in the next poll or whether the drop has already happened, and that's the way it goes. All right, thank you guys. Do appreciate it. We'll talk